Barn burning. William Faulkner. Just a couple of background things about Faulkner. Novelist, short story writer, screenwriter, wrote the screenplay for a film called Intruder in the Dust. Was not a box office hit. He thought he would be a great writer for films in the 30s and early 40s. Nobel Prize for Literature in 1950, primarily for his novels. He's got several major novels that most people don't actually read. They're usually taught in English courses because they're very difficult to read. One of them has multiple narrators, including dead people. He's the first one to kind of do this. That one's kind of stream of consciousness, we won't talk about it. He creates, for most of his novels, well, many of his novels and some of the short stories, he creates an imaginary county in Mississippi named Yoknapatawpha, all right? A lot of the action is set in that county. And it's like he wants to make an imaginary county so that he can throw things together that doesn't tie to a particular real place and draw attention to that real place, so to speak. Most of his stuff is set late 19th century, after the Civil War. Some begin before the Civil War, but after the Civil War, up through the 1920s. I was trying to think in my first class if I could think of a novel set farther than 1940, and I can't really. Some of them travel, long passages of time within them. You've got two of his short stories in here, Barn Burning and A Rose for Emily, which is kind of a weird one. I like Barn Burning because it's pretty straightforward and clear. What else? Because his novels are often set in the post-Civil War period to 1920s or so, and in the Deep South, okay, his characters use a lot of terminology we would not use today, or we don't use today in polite society. You're going to hear the word nigger used 2 or 3 times in this short story. I believe it's used once in Flannery O'Connor's. But also have to remember when Faulkner himself is writing this. This story is written in 1939. Okay, that term was not looked at in 1939 how it is today. I'm not defending, I'm just saying it's a different time period. And one of the things, I didn't say this to my first class, I want us to try to do with each of the things we read is to in some way try to get ourselves into that time period, okay? We're gonna do the same thing when we do the 2 plays by Hamlet and the 2 plays by Sophocles, okay? So, the setting for this play, we're gonna be told some...
I can't help with that. You can't change it in setting.
Shut up. The setting in this play, we're gonna be told some details, but we don't get an exact date, all right? But we're gonna told about something, an event that occurred about 30 years previously, and that event is a Civil War. So it's the early 1890s, okay, is the time frame. We're gonna be told a specific month, May, okay, is mentioned, the mild May dust. So it's sometime in the 1890s, it's late spring. I lived in Mississippi for 4 years working on my PhD. Late spring, early May in Mississippi can be really hot, all right? We're not told exactly where in Mississippi. We're not told that it is this county. In fact, we see the characters move from one county to another. Major characters within the play, Abner, within the short story, Abner obviously, his youngest son, Colonel Sartorius Snopes, Sardi, Major Despain in kind of the second half of the story is a major character, okay? The family, the Snopes family consists of the father, Abner, the mother, Lenny, her sister, Lizzie, and 4 children, 2 sisters, two sons, two daughters. And Sardi is the only one named of the children. Okay? Now, one other comment about Faulkner, and then we'll jump into the story. Faulkner is known for long, convoluted sentences. Contemporary of his, Ernest Hemingway, same way. They just go on and on and on. The first paragraph on page 406 begins with a relatively short sentence, and then you get a sentence that begins, "The boy," printed on the first line of that paragraph, and that sentence does not end until you get the phrase "pool of blood," 4 lines up from the bottom of that paragraph. That's a long sentence. So, the store in which the justice of the peace's court was sitting smelled of cheese. Notice what we're told immediately. The action, there's a court. The location, it's not a courthouse. It's a general store. Okay? Then you get this long sentence. Just listen to this thing. The boy, crouched on his nail keg at the back of the crowded room, knew he smelled cheese and more. From where he sat, he could see the ranked shelves close packed with the solid, squat, dynamic shapes of tin cans, whose labels his stomach read, not from the lettering, which meant nothing to his mind, but from the scarlet devils and the silver curve of fish. This, the cheese which he knew he smelled, and the hermetic meat which his intestines believed he smelled, coming in intermittent gusts, momentary and brief, between the other constant one. The smell and sense just a little of fear, because mostly of despair and grief, the old fierce pool of blood. He could not see the table where the justice sat, and before which his father and his father's enemy, our enemy, he thought in that despair, Aaron, mine and his and both, he's my father, stood. But he could hear them, the two of them, that is, because his father had said no word yet. So, what are we told primarily in that long sentence about the boy? We're given some details about him. They're not explicit. They're not overt. Okay, it's implied. You have to tease the meaning out of it. The boy, he's sitting on in the back of the crowded room. Notice, the room's packed. It's like the whole town has come to find out how this case is going to go. He knew he smelled cheese and more. Now, the cheese is not like the cheese if you go to Publix or Kroger today. You know, it's wrapped in plastic. This is cheese that is not wrapped in plastic. It's not wrapped in anything. It might have along part of it that wax coating that cheese is made in, that's the form, but the rest of it isn't. So you go to a store like this that has open cheese out, and you're going to smell that when you walk in, especially if it's warm inside. All right? He knew he could smell cheese and more. From where he sits, he could see shelves. Shelves are packed with food. The solid, squat, dynamic shapes of tin cans whose labels his stomach read, not from the lettering. How does his stomach read? What are we being told about his stomach? Notice what's on these tin cans. The lettering which meant nothing to his mind, but from the scarlet devils and the silver curve of fish. That's how his stomach reads. Okay? He sees the fish on the tuna fish or sardines. But why does his stomach read that? Louder? Because he can't read the lettering. What are we being told about his stomach? He's hungry. This kid's hungry. He sees all this food. He smells the cheese. What does that start to do? The gastric juices start to flow. Okay? What else are we told about him? He can't read. He's illiterate. Okay? This, the cheese which he knew he smelled, and hermetic meat, which, what does hermetic mean? It's sealed from the air. He can't smell any meat. If you go to a grocery store and you pick up a can of tuna fish and you sniff it and you smell fish, you need to take it to customer service because there's something wrong. It's got a hole in it. You should not be, he doesn't literally smell it, okay, because it's properly sealed. Which he believed, his intestines believed he smelled. Coming in intermittent gusts, momentary and brief. That is, the feeling in his gut, it's like there's this churning. But this is momentary and brief. Between the other constant one. That is, the feeling in his gut. There's a constant uneasiness. The smell and sense, just a little of fear, because mostly of despair and grief. The old fierce pull of blood. Is the kid aware of this? Not at all. The kid, if the narrator would say, "Kid, come here, sit down. Let me tell you what you're thinking." The kid would, whoosh. What are you talking about? What old fierce pull of blood? He wouldn't be able to put it in those words. What does it mean in this context? Look at what comes next. He couldn't see the table, but he knows there's a table up there. He knows his father is sitting there. He knows the justice of the peace is there. And he knows the person who's brought a charge against his father is there. What does he call the justice of the peace and the man who brought the charge against his father? Our enemy. Why our? Aaron, mine and his and both. He's my father. That's the old fierce pull of blood. What's he doing? I'm going to stand with Dad. I'm going to defend my father. Why do? May not be an apt example, but I think it kind of gets there. Why do not all, many battered women stay with the men who batter them? It's the relationship. Here's where that analogy fails. That's not blood. Why do battered children, there's one, defend a parent? Might be fear, grief, despair. What happens if I'm taken away from that parent? Put in a situation that might even be worse, theoretically. But he hears them. He hears his father, he hears his father's enemies, because his father hasn't said anything yet. So what does he hear? But what proof have you, Mr. Harris? That's the justice of the peace speaking. I told you. Here's his proof, he says. Hog got into my corn. I caught it. I sent it back. Told him to fix his fence. He had no fence that would fix it. That would hold it. I told him so. Warned him. Next time, so the hog gets out twice. Next time I put the hog in my pen. When he came to get it, I gave him enough wire to patch up his pen. So what has Mr. Harris just done for the boy's father? Just showed, let me put it that way, to the boy's father. The boy's father comes to get the hog, and what does Mr. Harris do? He returns the hog, first of all, and he gives him supplies to fix the hog's pen. He doesn't sell it to him. He gives it to him. That's an act of kindness. That's an act of charity. Okay? That's the second time the hog gets out. The next time, third time the hog gets out, I put the hog up and kept it. I rode down to his house. I saw the wire I gave him still rolled onto the spool in his yard. He didn't even fix the pen. I told him he could have the hog when he paid me $1 pound fee. I don't know about you. At this point, if I'm Mr. Harris and the neighbor's hog is getting into my corn or something, guess what I'm having for breakfast in the morning? Okay, it's bacon time. But he doesn't. He says, come get it, you pay me $1. That evening, a nigger came with the $1 and got the hog. Okay? This former slave apparently works for Abner. We're not told how. We're not told how Abner can afford to pay him. Because he wouldn't be a slave anymore. By the time frame we're going to be told a little bit later on, this action is occurring. He said to tell you wood and hay can burn. That's what the former slave says. What? That what he said to tell you. So Mr. Harris, when he hears that, he says, what? Wood and hay can burn. That's a factual statement, right? Take a match, put it to hay, burns up. Take a match, put it to wood, it burns. What's the real meaning? You got anything made out of wood and hay? You got anything made out of wood where you keep hay? That evening, the barn burned. Got the stock out, but I lost the barn. Where is the nigger? Have you got him? That is, do you have the person who brought you this information? No. I don't know what became of him. But that's not proof. Why isn't it? Why would it be proof if the former slave was brought in to say these words? Because he's the one who said the words. What is Mr. Harris? If you've watched any law shows, any, police crime, law and order kind of stuff, what Mr. Harris has just said is what's called hearsay. It's inadmissible. You got to have the actual person who said it. Okay? Get that boy up here. He knows. And for a moment, the boy thinks it's his older brother. First time we're introduced, or we're told he has a brother. Not him, the younger one, the little one, the boy. And the boy, we're told, crouching, small for his age, small and wiry like his father, in patched and faded jeans, even too small for him, telling us what? Or emphasizing what about the family? They're poor. His jeans are too small. He has outgrown them, but they don't have any others. And they're patched and faded. With straight, uncombed brown hair, eyes gray and wild as storm, he saw the men between himself and the table part, at the end of which he saw the justice motioning him up. And the boy makes his way forward, but we're told he doesn't feel the floorboards as he walks across them in his bare feet. Why is he barefooted? Because he doesn't have shoes. Why? Because they're poor. We get this emphasis again and again. This family is dirt poor. And the boy thinks as he makes his way up and goes past his father, stiff in his black Sunday coat, donned not for the trial, but for the moving. And the narrators just told us what the father has already planned. And the boy thinks he aims for me to lie. And I will have to do it. What's your name, boy? The justice asks. Colonel Sartorius Snopes, the boy whispers. Eh? Talk louder. Colonel Sartorius? Okay. Little side note. Colonel Sartorius is a famous name in the Faulkner corpus of writing. He's an imaginary Confederate hero. Think Stonewall Jackson or Jefferson Davis. All right? So the boy being named after him confers kind of this aura of respectability, even though the boy's dirt poor. That's why the justice of the peace says, I reckon anybody named for Colonel Sartoris in this country can't help but tell the truth. He's like George Washington, you know, can never tell a lie. And the boy doesn't say anything. He just thinks, enemy, enemy. And then the narrator tells us, he could not see that the justice's face was kindly, nor discern that his voice was troubled when he spoke to the man named Harris. Do you want me to question this boy? Why is his voice troubled? What is Harris asking the judge to do? Get that boy up here, sit him down in that witness stand, and make him do what? Every trial is a confrontation. It's a confrontation between the prosecution and the defense. The boy's being asked as a witness for what side? The prosecution. You really gonna make that boy tell on his father? That's the import. But the boy could hear, and during those subsequent long seconds, while there was absolutely no sound in the crowded little room, said that quiet, blah, 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 blah. So he hears the question, and we get this description. It's as if the boy had swung on a rope out over a lake, a river, or creek, and he's at the top of the swing, getting ready to let go, to fall into the nice cool water. Time has frozen. He's suspended between the question being asked and what's the answer going to be. No damnation. Why doesn't Mr. Harris press the point? Get him out of here. And now the fluid world, whoosh, time begins again. I don't know if you've ever been in a car accident. Okay, I was in a pretty bad one. I was about your age. Delivering pizzas. Right front tire caught the shoulder of the road. This was on Lookout Mountain. Caught the shoulder of the road, and it just threw me. Just flipped me in the car. And literally, when I was upside down in the car, holding onto the steering wheel for dear life, I was like, this is it. And that 2 seconds, 3 seconds, literally seemed like hours until it hit the pavement and it skidded for another 100 feet or so. And then time was moving, sped up there. That's what the boy experiences. And now he hears all kinds of voices. And the justice of the peace says, this case is closed. I can't find against you, Snopes, but I can give you advice. In other words, you're not guilty, but you got to leave town. And Snopes says something that is unprintable, and the justice of the peace says, before dark. Okay, so technically, legally, who won this case? Snopes did. He's found not guilty, but he's got to move. Okay? So, his father gets up and leaves. The brother gets up and leaves, and the boy follows them both out. And they go down the steps, and just before the boy gets down to the dirt street, road level, somebody says, barn burner. And the boy acts out of anger. And he goes to throw a punch. We're not told how old the boy is yet. He goes to throw a punch, and the boy gets decked into the dirt. Father picks him up, takes him over to the wagon. As the boy gets into the wagon, we get a description of his two hulking sisters. What does hulking mean? Big girls. Later, they're going to be referred to as bovine, like cows. Okay? And we get a description of the wagon. And the wagon is what? Loaded with all their earthly goods. think Naomi's in this wagon. Why? Because the father knew no matter which way this court case went, we're moving. And the mother tries to, wipe up his face and stuff. He says, let me be, I'm fine. Okay? Page 408. They go on. The boy doesn't know where they're going. None of them ever did or ever asked, we're told. But it's always somewhere, always a house of sorts waiting for them, day, 2 days, maybe 3. And then we're told likely his father had already arranged to make a crop on another farm before ... What's the ... Before they moved? Well, that'd be obvious. What did he do before they moved? What does he do that requires them moving? Before he burned down another barn. So notice what we're told about Abner here. He doesn't just shoot from the hip. He plans things. Before he burned down Mr. Harris's barn, apparently, he'd already lined up another job. What does he do? He's a sharecropper. What do sharecroppers do? You agree to work a plot of land for somebody for a set number of months, usually from just before planting to harvest time. In payment for that, you get to keep a portion of what is produced by that land. Could work like this. Let's say the land you agree to work is 100 acres, 10 by 10 acres. You agree that you're going to do that, and you're going to take the results of maybe 1 acre. Or maybe it's that you agree to work for somebody, and the expected product of that land is, to use an example that's going to be later on in the play, in the short story, 100 bushels of corn. And you agree, I'll do it, but I keep 20 bushels. Okay? That's your payment that you can then use to sell, barter, etc. So this is what he does. This largely is what happened to a lot of slaves after the Civil War. They became sharecroppers. In other words, for many of them, they worked the exact same land they worked before. Only now, they got to keep some of the proceeds of that, right? So we're told in that paragraph, top of page 408, after that part about the moving, there was something, middle of that paragraph, there was something about his wolf-like independence and even courage when the advantage was at least neutral, which impressed strangers. Okay, just stop there for a moment. His wolf-like independence. Are wolves independent creatures? No. Wolves are pack animals. They run in packs. They're like lions, where you have a pride of lions. Okay? You have an alpha, the leader of the pack, and everybody else is a follower. When do you have wolves living away from packs? Or why do some wolves not live in packs? They've been kicked out. Those wolves have been made outcast. That's what the phrase outcast literally means, to be cast out. So what does that tell us about his wolf-like independence? Society has cast him out. He doesn't fit. Or, like what little kids sometimes get on the report cards. Doesn't play well with others. Okay? We have a phrase, it's used a lot more now than it was 40 or 50 years ago, to describe certain individuals. Usually it's used to describe terrorist incidents. The first question that comes out is this a lone wolf or part of a cell? We don't say, to keep the metaphor going, or part of a pack. Are there other terrorists? Because a lone wolf means what? One person acting alone against everybody. A cell means you got people acting in coordination, and that's a hell of a lot more dangerous than a lone wolf attack. Okay? So, there was something about his wolf-like independence and even courage when the advantage was at least neutral, which impressed strangers. What's meant by strangers? People who don't know Abner's history. People who don't know Abner Snopes or haven't heard stories about him, they're impressed by this guy. Why? Because of that independent streak and even courage when the advantage was at least neutral. That is, not when he had all the cards in the hand, but when when it looks like between he and somebody else, it's an even game. Strangers thought, yeah, I'm going to bet on this guy. As if they got from his latent ravening ferocity not so much a sense of dependability as a feeling that his ferocious conviction in the rightness of his own actions would be of advantage to all whose interest lay with his. So, as if they got from his what? Latent ravening ferocity. What does latent mean? It's there, it's just hidden. It's beneath the surface. So what is there, what is hidden beneath the surface? His ravening ferocity. We don't use the word ravening much. Ravenous is still used every now and then. Ravenous means what? Cannot be satisfied. Like an appetite that cannot be sated. You just eat. So his hidden, ravenous, what's ferocity? Ferociousness. Something that's ferocious cannot be what? Tamed. So, as if they could gain something by this, not a sense of dependability as much as a feeling from his ferocious conviction. Again, ferocious, untamable, ungovernable conviction in what? The rightness of his own actions. What are we told about Abner there? I am always right. The hell with everybody else. Okay? Notice, strangers looking at this guy think, you know, if he were on our side, oh, that would be a great coup for us, a great win for us. That it would be an advantage to all whose interest lay with his. Think, to use the word, because the word's going to be used, or has been used about the two sisters. Think of the Hulk, the Marvel superhero. The Hulk, when he's Hulk, is what? Unstoppable. He doesn't think. It's smash. Well, you kind of want smash on your side. You don't want that coming towards you. So that night, we're told they camp. The father builds a fire. What does he build it with? Are they carrying firewood with them? No, he takes apart a split rail fence. He takes one board and he makes a little fire. Early May in Mississippi can be very cold in the evenings. We're already told the boy is wearing threadbare clothes. It's not like they bundle up with jackets and blankets and such. But his father doesn't build a big rip-roaring fire to provide them heat with. Why not? Because we're told the boy might think later in life. The boy might have remarked about this, that is, wondering, why does he build such a small fire? And wondered, why not a big one? Why should not a man who had not only seen the waste and extravagance of war, but who had in his blood an inherent voracious prodigality with material not his own, not burn everything in sight? What is that voracious prodigality with material not his own. Maybe you've known people like this. You loan someone something, or you let someone borrow something, and they don't treat it with respect. Instead, they use it up, or they destroy it. Why? It's not mine. The boy's wondering, why would he is more than willing to destroy things that belong to others, like barns? Why doesn't he do a big fire for us when he could? And then we're told, then he might have gone a step farther and thought, well, that's the reason. Fire is not merely something you use to heat with. No. That niggard blaze, and I always have to point out the word niggard, Niggard. Anybody know what that means? It means cheap, like inexpensive, not extravagant. If somebody is described as niggardly, it means they're tight-fisted. They don't loan money. They don't give things out to people. It's all mine, okay? So that kind of fire, that is, it keeps its heat to itself because it's so small, was the living fruit of nights passed during those 4 years in the woods, hiding from all men, blue or gray, with his strings of horses, captured horses he called them. We've already been told in the beginning introduction to the boy's father, the man walks with a limp. Why? Because during the Civil War, he'd been shot in the heel by a Confederate as he was stealing horses. Okay? So does that mean he's a Yank? Is he a Northerner? No. Just means he was stealing horses from the South. Here, we are told he stole horses from both sides. During the 4 years of the Civil War, what side did Abner fight on? Neither. He went to war, we're going to be told in the last page, he went to war in the old-fashioned way. He got involved so that he could steal. He could get out of the war what he wanted. Okay? Wife and I have been watching, I've seen it before, Band of Brothers. World War II series, HBO. And there's one scene towards the end of the war when the E Company is in Germany now. Guys are just going into these houses, including officers, and they're stealing stuff. It's like, they don't need it anymore. Take it to the PO and have it sent off back home. Then he might have gone a step further. The nights passed during the war, stealing from all men, blue or gray. Older still, the boy might have divined, that is, it might have come as inspiration, the real reason. Because the element of fire speaks to the father the way a handgun or a rifle speaks to a murderer who uses a handgun or a rifle. Or the way a sword speaks to an officer with honor who will fight a duel with the sword. For him, it is a weapon of destruction. So, cooking a meal, small fire. Heating a home, small fire. Destroying your enemy, conflagration. Holocaust. Fire for him was the one weapon for the preservation of integrity. How does Abner preserve his integrity? He burns down your house. You call me a whatever, this is how I strike back. Notice how it's never a strike against an actual individual. He doesn't try to burn down Mr. Harris's house that he lives in. He's not going to try to burn down Major Despain's house. What kind of person does this? If you can't strike back against me, but you want to strike against me, what can you do if you're a bully? Because this is how bullies behave. I'm going to go after your kids. I'm going to go after your family. I'm going to go after your cat. I'm going to go after your dog. I'm going to slash your tires. Why? Because I'm not going to confront you. Because you might respond. But the boy doesn't think about any of this now. And the father comes up to him and says, you were fixing to tell them. You would have told them. The boy doesn't answer. His father smacks him upside the head. But we're told, hard, but without heat. What is heat an element of? Fire. He doesn't strike him to destroy. There's no feeling on Abner's part here. Okay? You're getting to be a man. This is a teaching moment for him. You got to learn. You got to learn to stick to your own blood, or you ain't going to have any blood to stick to you. If you don't stand with me, then what? Not only I won't stand with you, but none of your family will stand with you. Why? Because they're going to stand with me. If you don't have anybody to stick with you, what do you become? Wolf-like independent. In other words, you become an outcast. Is Abner an outcast? He is from society, but his family still sticks with him. Do you think either of them, any man there this morning, would? That is, would that justice of the peace have stuck with you, boy? Would that Mr. Harris? Well, go back for a moment and reread the sections that deal with them. What are we told about both of them? They were kind. Don't you know all they wanted was a chance to get at me because they knew I had them beat? That's why that trial was going on, because he beat them. Now, I mentioned, as a result of the actual court trial, Abner won, right? He wasn't found guilty. He's not hanging from his neck, which would have happened if he'd been found guilty. Did he win? They're the ones who moved. And 20 years later, the boy thinks to himself, if I had said they only wanted truth, justice, he would have hit me again. In other words, they didn't want to beat you, Dad. They just wanted the God's honest truth. But now the boy didn't say anything. He's not crying. He just stood there. Answer me, Father says. Yes. You're right. I would have told the truth. Even though the boy thinks when he's called forward, I've got to lie. He aims for me to lie, and I will have to. Okay? So the next morning, they get to their new home. A 2-room house. 2-room does not mean 2-bedroom. It means 1 room for sleeping, 1 room for cooking and eating. With 7 people. Okay? So the 2 sisters got down, big bovine in a flutter of cheap ribbons, etc., etc. They get the wagon unpacked, and then the boy and his father make their way up to the big house. And he tells his wife, page 409, paragraph 39, I reckon I'll have a word with the man that aims to begin tomorrow owning me body and soul for the next 8 months. And they make their way, and if you turn to page, I think it's 405, yep, 405 in your book, you have a picture of Faulkner's home. It's called Rowan Oak. And you have a picture of the driveway, and you've got these trees down the side. I think they're Rowan Oaks. And the white house at the end of the drive. It pretty much matches the description that Faulkner gives here for Major Despain's house. And so as they make their way, middle of 409, the boy sees the house, and we're told he'd never seen a house like this before. It's big as a courthouse. And he feels a surge of peace and joy. Why? Whose reason he could not have thought into words. And this is what he thinks. They are safe from him. People whose lives are part of this peace and dignity are beyond his touch. In other words, he can't touch them. He can't burn this down. He's, we're told, no more to them than a buzzing wasp. But what do you do with buzzing wasps? You squish them. Capable of stinging for a little moment, but that's all. The spell of this peace and dignity. And we're told, in this, the peace and joy ebbing for an instant. What's ebbing mean? We use that word ebb usually only in the context of ebb and flow, like of tides or tidal flow into tidal rivers and such. The flow is when the ocean tide comes in, and when it ebbs, it recedes. This peace and joy do what? They ebb. When? As he sees his father walking ahead of him, walking down the driveway, and there's a pile of freshly deposited horse dung. And his father walking with that stiff leg because of the limp, and he steps with the bad leg right in the middle of the horse dung. And what are we told he could have done? The stiff and implacable limp of the figure, which was not dwarfed by the house for the reason it had never looked big anywhere, blah, 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 blah. He saw the stiff foot come squarely down in a pile of fresh droppings, in which his father could have avoided by a simple change of stride. He could have done a little step like that and stepped right over it. What else could he have done? Step to the left and back in a straight line. Step to the right and back in a straight line. But no, his father can't do that. Why? Because he's described as implacable. He cannot be stopped. He cannot be appeased. He sees the father, that horse crap, and he just walks right into it. And he's going to go up onto the steps. He bangs on the door. A servant opens. Okay. Servant tells him to leave as Abner steps in onto this nice round rug, paled rug. And he steps in the center of it. The servant says, "Wipe your foots. Get out of my way, nigger." The servant calls for Mrs. Despain. She comes down. She tells him to leave, and he does. He doesn't throw a fit. He doesn't throw a fight. He stops, turns, and leaves. But how does he turn? He's standing with his good foot planted in the middle of the rug, and he does this. And he makes a half-circle arc with horse shit on this fancy rug that we later find out came from France. Did he have to? Nope. Making a statement. They leave. Okay. And then he draws, so he makes that half circle arc, as I said, and then he steps and drags the foot the rest of the way. So what is left on the rug looks like this. Like a question mark almost. All right? Actually, it should probably be like that because he pivots and goes around. 2 hours later, boy's chopping wood. Somebody comes up with the rug. Negro youth throws it on the ground. The man's told to clean it. Abner is told to clean it. The mother says, I'll do it. Abner says, page 411, paragraph 51, if I thought enough of a rug to have to get it all the way from France, I wouldn't keep it where folks coming in would have to tromp on it. In other words, if you got this damn rug all the way from France, why are you putting it right in front of the main front door? Well, that's not his business, is it? Maybe Major Despain likes to show it off that way. Okay? So he promises to clean it. Does he clean the rug? Yes, he does. When he's done, the horse crap's out of the rug. It's not there anymore. But we get this nice description. Middle of the page, paragraph 55. Where the tracks of his father's foot were gone. See? All's good. Where they had been were now long, water-cloudy scoriations resembling the sporadic course of a Lilliputian mowing machine. Lilliputian, from Lilliput, Gulliver's Travels, little tiny people with little tiny lawnmowers, and they took that stain all out. So now you have a rug, if you're looking at a cross-section, has fibers like this, and then fibers like that, where all the stain was. Stain's gone. Rug is totally ruined, but the stain is gone. Did he do what he was told to do? Yes, he did. Because what was he not told to do? I mean, this would be Abner's way of thinking. You told me to remove the stains. You did not tell me to remove the stains and return the rug in the condition it was before I put the stain on it. Okay? So, they take the rug back. Page 412. Mr. Despain, Major Despain, comes by the next day, page 412. You must realize, middle of the page, you have ruined that rug. Wasn't there anybody here, any of your women? He says, that rug cost $100. But you never had $100. You'll never have $100. So I'm going to charge you 20 bushels of corn against your crop. That is, that amount of crop that you get to, that bit of land, I'm taking 20 bushels of corn out of that. Okay? I'll add it in your contract. I won't keep Mrs. Bain quiet, but it'll teach you to wipe your feet before you enter her house again. Then he's gone. And the boy says, Pep, you done the best you could, Daddy. If he wanted it done different, why didn't he wait till you how? He won't get no 20 bushels. He won't get none. We'll get it. We'll get it and we'll hide it better. Okay? So the father talks to the older son. That was Wednesday. They work the rest of the week. Weekend comes. They have to go back into town. Page 413. It's Saturday. There's another trial. Who's on trial this time? It's not Abner. Abner has brought charges against Major Despain. The gall of this guy, right? Why? Because he's saying, he's charged me for this when I did what I was told to do. And the Justice of the Peace says, page 413, you think 20 bushels of corn is too high for the damage? He brought the rug to me, said he wanted the tracks washed out of it. I washed the tracks out and took the rug back. But you didn't carry the rug back to him in the same condition it was in before you made the tracks on it. Notice Abner doesn't respond. What should Abner do at that point? But, Your Honor, that's not what I was told to do. I mean, that should be his response. So, the judge says, I'm finding against you. You were responsible for the injury, blah, blah, blah. So he says, 20 bushels of corn, that's pretty steep for a man in your situation. Tell you what, October corn will be worth about 50 cents. Major to Spain can stand a $95 loss. On something he paid cash for, you can stand a $5 loss. Hold you in damages to Major to Spain to the amount of 10 bushels of corn. So 10 bushels of corn is worth $5. That's what he has to pay. Okay, we'll stop there. We'll finish this on Wednesday and start, we won't finish, but we'll start, a good man is hard to find, so have that read. One quick comment about the quizzes. The terminology you used might be correct. It might not be the exact same word, spelled the exact same way I put it in D2L. I go through every quiz and every exam and grade every question, okay? I'll do that later on today. The actual grade you get will then show up, okay? Not what the D2L automatically says it is.